Welcome back to the deep dive. I want you to start by picturing a really specific moment in time. It is the summer of 1973. We are in England, and the heat is, well, it's oppressive. It's that kind of heat where the tarmac literally melts on the roads and the air just shimmers above the pavement.
Right. Very sticky.
Yeah, exactly. It's quiet, it's rural, maybe a little bit sleepy. And then, tearing out of that shimmering heat haze, completely defying every known law of physics, comes a bright red double-decker bus.
A number 22 to Putney Common, to be exact.
Yeah.
Just driving straight out of the time vortex and crashing directly into the English countryside.
It is such a wild image, that mundane London bus just ripping through the fabric of space-time. And honestly, it's the perfect hook for what we are unpacking today. We are looking at a case file known as the Verdigris incident. And I have to say, looking at the stack of sources we have, this might be the single most bizarre, colorful, and psychologically tricky story we have ever covered on a deep dive.
Oh, it is certainly up there.
Yeah.
But what I really love about this case file is that beneath the absurdity, and there is a lot of absurdity here, there's this fascinating exploration of reality, fiction, and the profound dangers of misinterpreting information.
Yeah, we really aren't just talking about a magic bus today. I mean, we are talking about entire train carriages materializing in cornfields where there are absolutely no tracks. We are talking about characters from Jane Austen novels walking around in broad daylight, fully convinced they are late for a ball. And the twist, the real kicker here, is that when these people die, or I guess deactivate.
They don't decompose like normal biological organisms.
No, they don't. They literally crumble.
They turn into this pile of green, oily, glittery powder.
Verdigris.
Right, verdigris.
Which is chemically fascinating in itself, you know. Verdigris is typically the green pigment formed by the oxidation of copper. You see it on old statues or rooftops all the time. But in this specific context, the sources suggest it signifies something much more disturbing. It's the oxidation of reality itself.
The oxidation of reality. Wow. Yeah, it is the physical breakdown of a fictional construct trying to exist in a universe that physically cannot support it.
So our mission today is to unpack this totally chaotic week. We are diving into sources that detail an encounter between the Doctor, you know, that famous Time Lord exile, his organization unit, and a really mysterious, chaotic traveler named Iris Wildthyme.
We're talking about psychological warfare, fake aliens, a massive catastrophic misunderstanding of English literature, and a plot to turn the Earth into a postmodern nightmare.
It sounds like a joke, but it gets so dark.
It does, and I think it is really important to frame this correctly for you listening right now. At first glance, this just looks like a romp. It looks like a sci-fi comedy. But if you look at the strategic manipulation of reality involved in these sources, it's actually a horror story.
Yeah.
There's a cold, calculating attempt here to completely dismantle the Doctor's life piece by piece.
Okay, so let's unpack this, because it all starts with a reunion that literally nobody asked for.
Specifically, the arrival of Iris Wildthyme. Now, we have looked at dossiers on transdimensional travelers before on our deep dives, but Iris is entirely unique. She is essentially the antithesis of the Doctor in almost every single way.
She really is. The source material paints this incredibly vivid picture of her. She arrives in her TARDIS, which, as we mentioned, is disguised as that double-decker bus. But unlike the Doctor, who is, you know, all velvet jackets and ruffled shirts and scientific elegance.
They're very aristocratic.
Very. But Iris is described as having this, the quote is, raffish, haphazard, gum-ho glamour. She is wearing a floppy green felt hat, she is drinking gin straight up, and she is traveling with a companion named Tom.
And Tom is a crucial element here because he anchors the timeline for us. Iris picked him up from the year 2000. Now, to the people in 1973, the year 2000 is the far-flung sci-fi future. They expect silver jumpsuits and flying cars and jetpacks.
But Tom is just a guy in trainers who wants to go home to Putney.
Exactly. He is completely unimpressed by the wonders of the universe. He just wants a quiet life. But Iris drags him to the Doctor's house.
Right, and we really need to set the scene for where the Doctor is at this point in his life, according to the files. He is exiled on Earth, working for UNIT as a scientific advisor, and he's living in this grand, sweeping country house filled with Gothic statuary and all these weird artifacts.
He is desperately trying to impose order on his exile. You have to remember, he is an absolute genius trapped on a single rock. The sources mention he has these ginger jars sitting on his shelf, and they contain holograms of planets he can no longer visit.
I remember reading that. That is such a melancholy detail.
It really is. Iris actually calls it his cosmological bonsai. He is crooning the universe down to a manageable size because he can't have the real thing. He's trying to live a very quiet, civilized, aristocratic life, in the English countryside.
And then Iris just crashes the party.
Yeah.
Literally, she breaks into his house, and they end up in a physical altercation almost immediately. The doctor is trying to use Venusian Aikido, his highly refined, disciplined martial art.
And Iris just grabs him in a headlock.
Just a straight-up pub brawl headlock. It's amazing.
It is a perfect clash of philosophies. The doctor represents order, logic, and scientific detachment. Iris represents chaos, instinct, and emotional messiness. The doctor just wants a civilized dinner party, and Iris brings the noise. But what is really interesting in the sources is that this whole domestic dysfunction is suddenly interrupted by a warning.
Right. The phone call. This part actually gave me chills when I was going through the source text.
It's very eerie. A mysterious call goes out to the doctor and simultaneously to the local police and the hospitals, and the voice on the other end is distinctly described as flat and dull. It just announces the arrival of a railway carriage.
It doesn't scream. It doesn't threaten them. It just announces it. Like, there is a carriage. You might want to look at it. It's so mundane for something so physically impossible.
That flatness is the key detail. It's the banality of the anomaly. It signals that this isn't some natural phenomenon. It is a staged event. Someone is putting on a show and calmly waiting for the audience to take their seats.
So let's move into section 2 of our deep dive and look at these anomalies. Because the doctor, Iris, Joe Grant, who is the doctor's assistant, and Tom, they all go to investigate the coordinates provided by that creepy phone call, and they find this carriage just sitting in the middle of a cornfield.
And the sensory details in the report are very telling here. The carriage is radiating cold. It is physically displacing the oppressive heat of that summer day we talked about. It suggests an enormous energy consumption is happening just to keep this object existing in our dimension. It shouldn't be there, and the laws of thermodynamics know it.
They break into it, and it's full of people, but not, 1970s commuters in bell-bottoms. These people are fully dressed in 18th century clothing. We're talking crinolines, red military coats, powdered wigs, and they are all in some sort of trance.
Right, until they aren't. They are taken to a local hospital for observation, and this is where the Verdigris incident really earns its name. One of the passengers, a woman identifying herself as Mrs. Bennett, wakes up.
Mrs. Bennett. Like Pride and Prejudice Mrs. Bennett. The mother who is obsessed with marrying off her daughters.
The very same character. She wakes up in a 1973 hospital ward and immediately starts panicking about being late, about finding Mr. Bingley, about her daughter's marriage prospects. To the hospital staff, it seems like a delusion or a severe psychotic break. But then the real horror element kicks in.
Yeah, the source material gets surprisingly graphic right here. She freezes up, and her skin creates this sound. The report says it cracks like porcelain.
It creates a terrifying physical paradox.
Yeah.
These aren't just confused people in period costumes. The doctor discovers wrist bracelets on the bodies, which turn out to be alien communicators. But physiologically, when the stress of reality hits them, they don't bleed, they crumble. Mrs. Bennett turns into this green dust. The verdigris and her clothes are just left empty on the hospital bed.
It's total body horror, but it's also existential horror, right? It's the idea that a fictional character fundamentally cannot survive contact with the real world. They just disintegrate into pigment.
Precisely. They are mathematically incompatible with our reality. And it's not just this one carriage in a cornfield. While they are dealing with the dust of Mrs. Bennett in the ward, there is a second incident reported at Great Yarmouth, right on the beach.
And this one contains characters from Great Expectations. We have Miss Havisham, though I should note the report specifically points out the aliens spell it Haversham and Magwitch.
Which is a brilliant little detail about the degradation of the source text they are using.
Miss Havisham on a beach is an image I absolutely cannot get out of my head. The sources say she isn't frail at all. When the doctor approaches her, she doesn't swoon or act delicate. She actually throws him across the beach using martial arts.
Which is a massive clue for the investigation. These aren't the characters as written by Dickens or Austen. They are approximations. They are skins. They have skills and physical attributes that completely contradict the literature. So, Kung Fu Miss Havisham is funny, yes, but it signals from a strategic standpoint that whatever created these things didn't actually understand the source material.
And then she escapes to an amusement arcade to play a racing car game. It's hilarious, the juxtaposition of the rotting wedding dress and the glowing arcade cabinet. But then the report shifts, and it gets dark. Really dark.
The tragedy on the beach. We definitely have to talk about that. A mother and her children are on the pier, just watching this spectacle unfold. They are completely innocent bystanders. And a man in a military-grade coat simply walks up to them and shoots them.
Just like that. No warning.
Just like that. Unprovoked. And they turn to dust, too. This implies that the weapon used, or perhaps the nature of reality in that specific localized zone, is actively rewriting matter. It establishes early on that the stakes are incredibly high. This isn't just a literary cosplay convention gone wrong. It is an active invasion that wipes out the local population.
Which brings us to the psychological aspect of all this. Because while the doctor is dealing with Kung Fu Miss Havisham and people turning to dust on the beach, his assistant, Joe Grant, is going through a completely isolated nightmare of her own.
This brings us to Section 3. Psychological warfare. And I think, analytically, this is the most insidious part of the Master's entire plan.
We should probably mention, spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't read the actual case file, the Master is behind a lot of this. He's the doctor's arch nemesis. But Joe doesn't know that yet. She goes back to Unit HQ, the military organization she and the doctor work for, expecting safety and backup. But it's just wrong.
It's a complete dismantling of her reality. She walks in and finds the HQ entirely filled with flowers. It smells like a funeral parlor or a bizarre wedding, not a top-secret military base. And she encounters a man referred to in the sources as the Pinstripe Man, who calmly tells her that UNIT never existed.
That is deeply terrifying. Imagine working somewhere for years, literally saving the world, fighting horrific monsters, and someone sits you down in your own office and says, no, that was all just a training exercise. Aliens are just special effects, and by the way, you failed the test.
It is classic textbook gaslighting, but it is weaponized on a cosmic scale. The Pinstripe Man claims that all the monsters she has fought, the Daleks, the Axons, the Sea Devils, were just guys in rubber suits and clever pyrotechnics. He is deliberately using the inherent absurdity of her life against her. He's basically saying, your life is too ridiculous to be true, therefore you must be crazy.
And the imagery around her gets increasingly surreal. A stuffed bear in the room suddenly opens up to reveal the man is somehow inside it. And then Joe is chased down the hallways by, and I actually had to double check my notes here to make sure I read this right, sheep on casters.
Yes. Sheep on little wheels with glowing eyes.
That is the most 1970s fever dream thing I have ever heard in my life.
But think about the psychological symbolism of it. It is ludicrous. It is specifically designed to make her question her own sanity. If she sees sheep on casters chasing her down a military corridor, she might genuinely think she is hallucinating. It breaks down her trust in her own sensory input, and if she can't trust her eyes, she can't fight back.
And then comes the big reveal. The man in the greatcoat from the beach, the one who shot the family in cold blood. Joe runs into him, and she thinks it's her boss, the brigadier. She runs to him for help.
She runs to him for safety, in a state of absolute panic. And in a moment of pure, calculated trauma, he peels off his face.
Literally peels it off, like skin.
Like a rubber mask, revealing that he is actually the master.
Talk about a profound violation of trust.
It is a targeted attack on faith. The expert in me looks at this sequence and sees a very clear, very vicious strategy. The master isn't just trying to invade Earth with brute force. He wants to convince the doctor's allies that their entire life, their entire purpose is a sham. If he can break Joe Grant mentally, if he can make her believe her heroism was just a pathetic delusion, he breaks the doctor's strongest connection to humanity. It's cruel, it's incredibly efficient, and it's deeply personal.
It is so cruel. Meanwhile, while Joe is being mentally tortured at HQ, Tom Iris' companion from the year 2000 is getting pulled into a completely different kind of plot. This is Section 4 of our deep dive, The Children of Destiny.
This is a really fascinating subplot because it so heavily plays on the specific cultural anxieties of the 1970s regarding youth culture and new religious cults.
Yeah, Tom keeps hearing these telepathic messages from a boy named Kevin. He gets lured away from Iris and ends up in a snooker hall basement, which again is very 70s. It feels like everything in these files either happens in a snooker hall or an abandoned gravel quarry.
True, but inside this basement, it hides a highly advanced, high-tech base. He finds a group of teenagers down there, Kevin, Marcia, Peter, Mary, who claim they are a group called Destiny's Children.
And they have a giant, glowing electronic brain named Simon that's leading them.
Simon the computer. It's very kitsch, very retro sci-fi.
Yeah.
But their underlying ideology is extremely dangerous. They claim to be a new stage of evolved humans, and their goal is to guide Earth into joining a galactic federation.
And here's the major twist in their doctrine. They tell Tom that the Doctor is actually the villain of the universe. They say the Doctor is actively preventing Earth from joining this peaceful federation.
They even show Tom these fake rubber monsters, Daleks, again, to prove to him that the Doctor stages these planetary invasions. They are using the exact same narrative technique that the Master was using on Joe. The core message is, the Doctor creates false threats to keep you isolated and dependent on him.
But the flaw in their plan is Tom himself. Because Tom is from the year 2000. He knows the future. He knows for a fact there is no Galactic Federation in his time.
And their response to that contradiction is chilling. They tell him, you live in a perverted future. They claim the Doctor ruined the timeline and they're here to fix it so that utopia can happen.
That is a remarkably strong argument. If you are a kid in the 70s wanting to save the world, and someone tells you the only reason the future isn't a beautiful utopia is because of one old man in a velvet jacket, you might actually believe them.
Exactly. And the Master is pulling the strings down in that basement, too. He is manipulating these teenagers, using their genuine idealism and desire for a better world to build a trap for the Doctor. He's weaponizing the Doctor's own innate desire to protect the youth of Earth against him.
Okay, so we have intense gaslighting, and we have a techno-cult of teenagers, we have killer literary characters turning to green dust. But we still haven't answered the biggest question of the whole incident. Where are these literary characters actually coming from? Who is sending Mrs. Bennet and Miss Havisham to Earth in the first place?
This brings us to Section 5, the truth behind the invasion. And honestly, this is where the tone of the story abruptly shifts from psychological horror to a deeply tragic comedy of errors.
The Doctor and Iris eventually get captured during all this chaos and are taken up to space, and they finally find the mothership.
Which looks exactly like St. Pancras Station.
Of course it does. Why wouldn't it?
But pink and
Yeah.
floating in geostationary orbit.
I just love that image so much. A giant pink Victorian train station floating in the void of space. It's so whimsical and ridiculous.
And the interior is just as strange. It is comprised of infinite corridors entirely lined with books. But there's absolutely no cataloging system. There's no order. You'll find Chaucer right next to a Jilly Cooper novel. It is pure informational chaos. It's a library without a librarian.
And the aliens themselves, the ones running this ship, they're called the Meercocks, right?
Yes, a very distinctive species. The physical description is wild. They ride inside these metallic egg cups that are mounted on telescopic golden-clawed stilts.
That is certainly a specific look.
And their leader, the queen of this entire operation, is a young girl dressed exactly like Little Red Riding Hood, and she is accompanied everywhere by a subservient wolf.
Okay, so we have the visual of these stilts and the fairy tale outfits, but the why of it all is the best part of this entire deep dive. Why are they invading Earth dressed as fictional characters?
It all comes down to a single spy named Leonard Bast.
Leonard Bast, a name that lives in infamy.
He was a Meercock spy who was embedded on Earth, and he worked in a public library for 45 years. His sole mission was to send books back to his people so they could study Earth culture and eventually integrate peacefully. Because they're refugees, essentially. They lost their original homeworld and desperately needed a new one.
Okay, that sounds really noble, a peaceful cultural exchange program.
It was intended to be. But there was a fatal mistake. Leonard Bast was crushed by a falling bookshelf before he could properly finish his mission.
Literal death by literature.
Quite literally. And the problem was, up to the point of his tragic death, he'd only managed to send back fiction.
Oh, no.
Yes. The aliens read Pride and Prejudice, Great Expectations, the Bible, Dennis Wheatley's The Devil Rides Out, and they fundamentally thought these were accurate historical documents. They thought Mrs. Bennet and Miss Havisham were real, documented historical figures. They thought this was exactly what humans looked like and how they naturally behaved.
So they clone themselves into these specific forms to, blend in?
Precisely. They thought, if we dress like this, the humans will accept us. They just wanted to assimilate seamlessly into human society.
That is a colossal civilization-ending misunderstanding. But wait, what about when they actually arrived and realized it wasn't working? When the disguises clearly didn't fit the 1970s? I mean, when Miss Havisham is walking around a brightly lit 1970s arcade, people must have stared. The illusion was broken immediately.
This is where the source material gets really interesting and, frankly, hilarious from a cultural critique standpoint. They actually invented postmodernism as a defense mechanism.
Unpack that for me, because that's a huge claim. They invented postmodernism.
Yes. When they realized their disguises were wildly anachronistic or just didn't make logical sense in the modern world, they decided the best tactical move was to confuse the humans. They claimed they were intentionally disrupting the epistemological dominant of Earth. They started using complex academic concepts like metatextuality simply to explain away their own glaring inconsistencies.
So let me get this straight. If a normal human walks up to them and says, "Hey, why are you dressed like a rotting Victorian bride in a 1970s amusement arcade?" they don't fight. They just say, it's a postmodern statement on the nature of reality.
Exactly. We are challenging your narrative constructs.
Mhm.
They literally turned their own massive tactical error into a sophisticated philosophical movement. It's brilliant in a very cynical way. If you can't be accurate, just be incredibly confusing.
But underneath all the humor of that, there really is a tragedy happening.
A deep existential tragedy. Because the alien physiology simply cannot sustain these fictional forms in Earth's atmosphere. That is exactly why they turn to verdigris dust upon experiencing stress or trauma. They are actively dying. The physics of our universe is rejecting their fictional constructs. The leader, Little Red Riding Hood, she knows this is happening, but she is utterly terrified to tell her people the truth because the last queen was literally torn to shreds by the populace for delivering bad news.
So this entire fleet of refugees is marching to their deaths, fueled by a misunderstanding of a local library sorting system. That is just heartbreaking.
It really is. It perfectly highlights the danger of receiving information without the necessary context. Text without subtext can be fatal. Leonard Bast sent the raw data, but he didn't send the user manual on how to interpret it.
And speaking of fatal misunderstandings based on lack of context, we have to talk about the handbag. This is section 6.
The handbag deity. This is perhaps the most bizarre twist in the entire set of sources, and considering everything we've discussed, that is really saying something.
So Iris Wildthyme carries this golden clutch handbag. It's her signature accessory. She never leaves home without it. It holds her gin, her lipstick, probably a spare tire for the bus, who knows. But to the Meercocks, it represents something else entirely.
When they catch sight of it on the ship, they immediately drop to their knees. To them, the physical shape and aura of the handbag perfectly resembles an ancient god or a sacred relic from their lost homeworld's past.
So the entire planetary invasion just stops over a purse.
It practically grinds to a complete halt. The aliens who are currently dressed as Bluebeard, Grendel's mother, Tolkien orcs, Macbeth witches, they completely abandon their military invasion to prostrate themselves before the bag in this makeshift chapel they set up in the corridors.
I'm just trying to picture a Tolkien orc prostrating himself before a shiny golden clutch purse. It's too much.
But again, look at the psychology. It speaks to their profound desperation. They are lost refugees desperately looking for salvation. First, they look to Earth literature for a pattern to follow. When that began to fail and physically kill them, they immediately pivoted to religious iconography. Even if that icon happens to be a Time Lord's fashion accessory, it shows exactly how desperate they are for meaning and structure.
But Iris is not having it. She has to get it back, right? She's not going to let a bunch of aliens keep her favorite bag.
She certainly does not. The source heavily describes her physically tackling a Macbeth witch and a Tolkien orc just to steal her handbag back from the altar. And then she has to flee down these infinite book-lined corridors with the doctor. It's pure chaos. It's totally undignified, it's messy, and it is very, very Iris.
Which naturally leads us to the climax of the whole ordeal. Section 7. The doctor, being the doctor, obviously tries to find a peaceful fix for all this.
He does. He realizes they aren't hostile warriors. They're just deeply confused refugees. He sees past the absurd costumes and the terrifying verdigris dust. He formally offers to find them a completely empty world to colonize safely. A real home, where they don't have to pretend to be fictional characters just to survive.
But there's a massive snag in his plan. The doctor's TARDIS is broken. He's exiled to Earth, remember? He physically can't leave the planet to find them a home.
But Iris's bus works perfectly.
So he needs to use her bus.
And Iris, well, Iris is incredibly suspicious of his motives. She firmly believes the doctor just wants to steal her bus to escape his exile. She thinks he will just dump the alien somewhere and run off back to the stars, leaving her stranded.
Is she right? Does the source material give a clear answer on his intentions?
It's actually left deliberately ambiguous. The doctor is undeniably desperate to escape. He hates being trapped on Earth. But he also has a very strong documented moral code. Regardless of his true intentions, Iris flat out refuses to help him. It escalates into a full-blown physical fight between them, and as a result, they both get locked in a holding cell by the Meercocks.
It is amazing how incredibly petty these two ancient, powerful Time Lords can be when you put them in a room together.
It really grounds them as characters. They're bickering like jealous siblings, while an entire civilization literally hangs in the balance. It shows that even the most evolved, powerful beings in the universe are fundamentally flawed and petty.
So how do they eventually escape this all?
Little Red Riding Hood, the alien queen, actually helps them. She has an epiphany. She realizes her people have turned into mindless religious fanatics over the handbag. She sees the madness of the situation. She realizes that worshiping a golden purse is not a viable long-term survival strategy for her species. So she secretly helps the Doctor escape in a life pod headed back to Earth.
And what about Iris? Does she get left behind?
Oh, she forces her way into the pod at the very last second.
Yeah.
She is absolutely not getting left behind on a pink space station with a bunch of rapidly decaying handbag worshippers.
So they crash land back on Earth safe and sound?
Presumably, yes. Leaving the Muircocks in orbit, stuck in a state of intense religious fervor, but potentially with a new, peaceful path forward, if the Doctor can eventually fulfill his promise to help them relocate.
Wow. So what does this all mean for us? Looking back at this whole file, we have a story that is incredibly silly on the surface. You know, handbag gods, pink Victorian space stations, Kung Fu Miss Havisham playing arcade games, but deep down it feels really serious.
It is, at its core, a story about the extreme fragility of reality. The Master tries to violently break reality to hurt the Doctor.
Yeah.
The alien refugees try to rewrite reality just to survive a hostile universe. And the humans, Joe Grant, young Tom, that poor family on the beach, they're all just collateral damage caught in the crossfire of these warring narratives.
It's also a huge, glaring warning about source literacy.
Absolutely. Think about Leonard Bast. He sent vast amounts of information back home, but he didn't send the key required to understand it. He sent stories without the explicit label of fiction. And that simple omission nearly destroyed a civilization. It reminds us that context is everything. Without context, information isn't just noise, it's a loaded weapon.
And that postmodern defense really sticks with me. The whole idea that if you can't logically explain something you've done, you just wrap it in complex, inaccessible language and call it high art or philosophy.
It suggests that confusion itself can be a potent weapon. Whether it is the Master gaslighting Joe with terrifying sheep on wheels, or the aliens confusing humanity with academic metatextuality, confusion is intentionally used to control the narrative and hide the truth. If you can keep people confused, you can keep them compliant.
It really makes you wonder. The source material explicitly mentions the aliens invented postmodernism to cover their tracks.
Which is a deeply provocative thought to leave on.
Yeah, I want you to think about this. If the intense cultural confusion of the late 20th century, the idea that nothing is real, that everything is just a copy of a copy, if all of that was actually just an alien cover-up for a botched, ridiculous invasion, what else in our culture is just a cover-up?
It forces you to look at modern history through a completely different lens. If you look at major sudden cultural shifts, massive leaps in technology, avant-garde art movements, or strange new philosophies, are they natural human evolutions? Or are they simply special effects designed to hide a much stranger alien truth? Are we looking at organic history, or are we just reading a well-crafted cover story?
That is a thought that is definitely going to keep me up at night.
As it should. A little skepticism about the fabric of reality is healthy.
Well, thank you for listening to this deep dive into the Verdigris incident. It has been a truly wild ride on the number 22 bus.
Keep your eyes open out there. And maybe double-check your handbag. You really never know who might be worshiping it.
Very true. See you next time.